The internet is overreacting again. Death threats my way. Is it Tuesday? I don't want to get emotionally involved in that mess, so I'll just play this new game I heard about Palworld instead. Boy, am I glad there was so much shouting about it, or I wouldn't have found out it exists. Hey, what's the alarm going off for? Oh, well, there's this new game called Palworld. It mixes Ark and Pokemon, and it stole some ideas and stuff. Oh, heck, that sounds super fun. I'm gonna go tell all my friends. No, don't. That said, though, no, plenty of the pals are just simple rips. I mean, there's no AI generation. They are all human-made and original. Human-made, I can agree with. But original? Birdash! Nux! Azurope! Egad! There's millions upon millions of animals out there. And what do you make your cotton candy sweet monster? A fluffy dog, just like Pokemon did? So Palworld's big. Its early access launch was 5 days ago as of recording, and it already has 7 million players. That's more than Pokemon Legends Arceus' first week. And that was a mostly finished game on launch. Palworld is the #1 most played game on Steam right now. It's the most played Japanese developed game ever on Steam. And in the total overall history of peak players playing at the same time, it's already #2 in history, only behind PUBG. And it's still rising, but not without controversy. There has been a lot of discussion about this game, and I've seen a lot of just silly takes from people on both sides. You see, I'm playing the both sides are bad card, so I appear more intelligent. But really though, Palworld is a fun game and is important as a wake-up call for Game Freak and Pokemon to be better and listen to their leaving fans. And Palworld rips off some Pokemon designs and is creatively bankrupt are not mutually exclusive statements. They can both be true, and arguably they are. The best thing to do to your comment section is piss off both sides. But we'll talk more about all that stuff after the tier list though, since I know that's what you're mainly here for. As a Pokemon expert who also has completed the PAL deck in Palworld, just how original are each of the designs? I've seen a lot of dishonesty about this on social media. The claim that 90% of them are straight up stolen, ripped from Pokemon using the exact same models is factually incorrect. Though there do exist ones that sort of fit some of that criteria, all but literally. But those are, of course, the ones you'll see posted about everywhere because they are the most egregious of sins, which in turn may give those who haven't played the game an inaccurate impression of it. So let's go ahead and begin my rant about some of these now and put them into this nice, well-organized tier list that does not at all look into how well-designed or good-looking or cool they are or anything, but solely at originality as I see it. And it is organized thusly. We begin with S tier. It is comprised mostly of pals completely original to my knowledge. Simply a pal. An anime animal with some twist. They could look like they fit in perfectly right next to a Pokemon, but aren't a Pokemon. You know? We'll put Thwack here, for example. A platypus Pokemon hasn't been done yet. Best you could say is this is another take on Temtem's Platypet, but even then it doesn't look inspired by that either. This may not be the most well-designed thing in the universe, but it's original, which is what this tier list cares about. S tier. Now, A tier is for mostly original pals. They may remind me of something like a Pokemon or Digimon that's been done already, but it's still a relatively fresh take on the idea. Remember, Pokemon doesn't own ideas, they own designs. Take Mossanda. I love this guy. One of the best designs and one of the most original, visually anyway. It is ultimately a grass-type fighting cartoon panda, and a fighting panda doing elegant falls and punches and kicks kinda kung fu style is nothing new. A tried and true trope done by dozens of franchises already, but none of them look as cartoony and comedically large in the way that Mossanda does, giving it A tier. B tier is a middling mix, a somewhat unique twist on a common idea that's been done plenty. It's tropey, it may be derivative of a Pokemon, but it's fine. I'd give it a pass. Barely. For a non-Pokemon example, take Kitsune. It's sort of a blue Amaterasu from Okami, but both are based on the same thing, the mythical Kitsune, so there's going to be a lot of design overlap no matter what. It may be a smidge on the nose and obvious for some, just kind of being a Kitsune, with even some of the same flair that Amaterasu had, but I think it's fitting of B tier. C tier is basically a Pokemon. Same Pokemon concepts, if otherwise unique-ish looking, just plainly unoriginal. Perhaps fitting of those cartoons within cartoons kind of thing, generic on purpose. Lifmunk is an interesting case. It uses the same concept that the Pokemon Scraggy and Scrafty use, though it looks completely different. They are all punky hoodlum lizards that wear baggy clothes, and at least in the case of Lifmunk, it's not its own skin, unless it is. It doesn't say either way, but arguably it leans more into the hip-hop side of things, with the way it poses itself and even walks while spitting mad flow, yo. I'm white. But it doesn't help that it's also using the same colors and spiky frill as the one other lizard punk in Pokemon, Toxtricity. Lifmunk gets lower, C tier. D tier is for pals that are basically just Pokemon fusions. You take 2, maybe 3 Pokemon and throw them in a bucket together until they hatched this design. Years ago, there was this big trend of using this fusion tool to fuse 2 Pokemon, and then fan artists would fuse them together into proper art, and it was like a big thing. There's now more fan art of this than you could possibly see in your lifetime. So perhaps Palworld devs utilized this tool as a starting point for their design process, or maybe it just stopped after they clicked generate and then they just added a frill or 2. This is where I start to see a lot of dishonesty start popping up on the socials though. Like, I don't want to call out names or any specific posts, but you see people pointing at things like, look at those paws! Those paws look just like this other Pokemon's paws! But then the rest of the design looks nothing like it. Like, guys, animals have paws, and other body parts too. When making an anime monster out of an animal, there's going to be overlap. Guys, this pal has 8 feathers on its wing just like this Pokemon, and also the real bird that they're both based on, but Pokemon owns the rights to birds! There's only so many ways to draw a given animal or thing, and if you start having to piece together parts from 4 or more different Pokemon entirely, I don't think it's quite a rip at that point. They took this one's tail, and this one's ears, and this one's torso, and this one's hair, and this one's horns, and this one's like, please, just be honest. If you laser focus on finding similarities, you're going to find them, no matter what. Freaking Bouffalant stole its hair and horns from Tyrant Minotaur from the original monster catching and taming game, Shin Megami Tensei. Yes, in case you didn't know, Pokemon didn't even invent the genre. And oh no, look, a spooky tree that crawls on its roots! Quick, somebody cancel Trevenant! There also have been rumors floating around of the devs using an AI trained on Pokemon art for its designs too, but there's no solid evidence of such. Also keep in mind, generative AI is incredibly new, and it being competent is even newer. And this game has been in development since before most of them even existed. Let alone were publicly available. Plus, they more recently came out and said, no, there's no AI generation, they are all human-made and original. Human-made I can agree with. But original? Some of these pals are complete fusion ripoffs. Let's finally get back to the tier list. Dinossum is among the most obvious and most blatant fusion. Make a Goodra grass type and you're 80% of the way there already. Then just plop on Lilligant's flower crown. But wait, hang on! Some Palworld defenders say. It's not like Pokemon owns that flower. They could have just been inspired by the same kind of flower. Except no, Lilligant's flower is a fictionalized flower. The closest real-world flower is the lily, which comes in both colors we're talking about, pink and orange. But the lily does not have nearly as plump of petals as Lilligant's does, nor does it have the little crown at the center, or the little upward tips, or the nice line pattern dot thing on all the petals. This is a Lilligant original flower based on the lily, which in turn makes Dinossum clearly just a Lilligant Goodra. Egad. D tier. And finally, the Fs. Oh my god, it's just a Pokemon. Like, holy crap, it's literally a Pokemon with just enough tweaks to make it legally distinct. Holy bean stinking Verdash. It is a grass-type Cinderace, full stop. The feet, the paws, the full-on, just all of the body proportions, the big hair. At least it got a different, though similar haircut. The pants, it has the same frills on the pants. Some have added that it even has the same colors and ears as Leafeon, and the neck frill is Hisuian Arcanine, but I don't even think you need to bring that up. This is just Cinderace with tweaks. Full stop. Even the name, Cinderace. Cinders, fire, red. Race cause it's fast. Verdash, it's Viridian, green, planty. Dash cause it's fast. Like, the only defense you could give here is parody. But that only takes you so far. More on that at the end, though. Let's get on with the full list, mostly alphabetical in order, and you'll notice as we go on the tiers kind of bleed into each other a bit, because that always happens because listing nuance is tricky. So Anubis. First of all, terribly unoriginal name. And you know it's only here exclusively because of Lucario, who did the whole Egyptian boxing thing and being a jackal or golden wolf already, and without being as outwardly obvious with its Egyptianiness. Lucario being the most popular Pokemon means it had to be included in Palworld, but at least they boiled it down to its most pure elements, an Egyptian fighting furry, instead of it just being like Lucario but yellow. C tier. Astagon's first impression is of a Space Godzilla villain, and it seems pretty unique otherwise, until you take Zekrom and color the claws and inner wings pink and give it the body shape of Aggron or Mega Aggron. Upper D tier. Azurobe is a water-type superior with Primarina hair and ribbons instead of Primarina's frills. Like, the hair is just so identical. 3 chunks and a bit of frill at the end, inverting the direction that the hair wisps and ending in 3. Like, at its core, it's almost exactly Primarina's hair. D tier. Beacon, I can't fault though. It is just an electric bird, Thunderbird thing, ultimately. Nothing too unique, but at least it's not literally Zapdos, so... You know what? A tier? Lower A? B-Guard and Elizabeth also. You know, it's not at all an original idea, but at least they aren't just Vespiquen. These are original designs reflective of their British origins. Lower A tier for both. Blazomet. I do quite like this guy, and it's unlike any Pokemon. That said, some mythology knowledge, Bahamut and Behemoth both pull from the same myth, and this is Behemoth in Final Fantasy. So the PAL seems a bit less original now. It's just got a Dragon Quest or Digimon-y face to differentiate it somewhat. Lower C tier. Blaze Howl is just a Hellhound, a concept Pokemon did already with Houndoom, but it doesn't look anything like it, so it gets a pass. B tier. Bristla, Petalia, and Lylene will cover all at once. None of them are just a Pokemon, but they do all follow the same trope that Pokemon established and has continued with. A very feminine, flowery grass type in a puffy and or curvy dress of sorts. Lylene gets a bonus mention because it is kind of Mega Gardevoir, but following that Pokemon trope, so kind of a mix of Lilligant with Mega Gardevoir again. Despite that though, I think it's still changed enough for lower C tier. Or maybe upper D. Petalia, lower B, and B tier for Bristla. No thorny Pokemon ladies yet. Broncherry ultimately is Meganium with some superior green curls, but they did a unique twist with the fusion, I feel, and they added on plenty of other elements, so we'll go ahead and bump it into C tier. Bushi. You'd think, oh, it's a Ronin Samurai. That's unique. They finally did something fully unique, and that's why it looks bad. Though, it also is just what would happen if you made Mawile a samurai. Keeping it down to C tier. Capridy. Yeah, it's a goat bush like Go-Goat, but it's, in my eyes, a unique take on the idea, especially because they added in a lot of bunny elements. It'll go ahead and get A tier. Cattiva is honestly pretty unique, as simple as it is. Hard to go wrong with a cat that just carries things, you know? No faults, just because there's really nothing to it. An unfortunate S tier. Cognito is really just the obvious thing to do with a crow or raven. Ooh, make it spooky, give it a Plague Doctor mask, seen it a million times. But at least it's not literally a Pokemon, though it does sort of have Haunchcrow's hat, down to the extra feather even. But I do like how in its run animations, it's the spies from Spy vs. Spy, right? It's a walking reference. Hence another point I should probably bring up. References exist, and they're A-okay. We'll talk more about that at the end. There's a whole huge rant at the end. Stay tuned. But, Cognito will give C tier. Celeray seems more unique on the surface, only because one of the Pokemon it's pulling from is also one of the most forgotten. Finneon. It's a Finneon crossed with Mantike, but only vaguely, maybe. There's some extra smoothing out and light panels to differentiate it at least, so we'll give it a C instead of a D. Chikipi. I mean, it's a chibi cartoon chicken. Hard to judge in that context, but it's not exactly like any other video game chickens that I could seem to find in all the research. I've looked at so many chickens. So I guess the chicken gets A tier. Chillet. Seeing how big it is in-game is really what gave it away. It's if Furret, who is equally huge by the way, was a Dragon Ice type. It's just a Dragon Ice type regional variant of Furret. F tier, as cute as it is. Cinnamoth is a cute moth, and it utilizing the medicinal and other properties of cinnamon is a unique twist, giving it S tier. Creamus It's just a tiny Gigantamax Eevee. Like, they didn't even try. Put Eevee in the dryer and call it a day. F tier. Cryolinks. Honestly, what other monsters in general have this body plan? Drapion? Maybe? But this thing is a very unique take on saber-toothed tigers and lynx and other ice-loving cats. Like, originality at its purest, perhaps even. Love this guy. S tier. Daydream, I also can't really fault, honestly. It vaguely reminds me of Lopmon, but not really. S tier. Depresso is just a smoothed out and emo Esper. At least they gave it personality. Still F tier though. Digtoise is if you took Bowser's shell and made the spikes drills and put it on Blastoise's arms and legs. It even does the same spin attack that Bowser does. Upper D tier, since the face is a bit different. Dazzy is a somewhat unique take on the whole genie that's actually an Oni thing that Pokemon did 4 of already, and also sort of invented, though perhaps not intentionally. If this design were in any other game without as many blatant Pokemon clones, I'm sure we would all think nothing of it. It's just a cute little cloud genie Oni thing. But because we know they were clearly looking at a bunch of Pokemon to be inspired by, I think this is gonna have to stick into C tier. Dire Howl. Terrible name again, but you could argue Lycanroc day form, but an anime wolf is an anime wolf? The mane is similarly shaped, I guess? Like, if it had rock type anything or spikes, I would say absolutely, but C tier. Dumud. That is Slowpoke's face. And even its lore is basically it's dumb and slow and oblivious and dumb, just like Slowpoke. So it's if Slowpoke was a mud skipper, which do have those little flags on the top of its head, but of course people point out that it looks just like Sobble's little flag. C tier? I mean, Slowpoke isn't a mud skipper, and Clodsire exists, but Pokemon don't own the concept of a fat mud skipper. Ichthyrdeer. Honestly, S tier, which is going to upset a lot of the more passionate among the Palworld haters, because of all of the pals, this is the one I've seen the most just blatant dishonesty around. Literally Xerneas is what I've seen a lot of. It's a colorful deer. You're gonna be furious when you find out Geodude was from Dragon Quest originally, and Digimon did the whole Lion Sun legendary way before Pokemon did. You can't own concepts and designs as broad as that deer from Norse mythology, you know? I think Palworld did a good job here not making it literally Sawsbuck or Xerneas, or even Ichthir from Valheim, so the S tier stands. Elphedron in lore is very similar to Dragonite, a big dopey dragon that relates more to air and wind than to fire, and it's gentle and kind, but if you make it angry it will freaking wreck you. But it doesn't look like Dragonite at all. If anything, it's like a very dragony, fairy version of Ampharos, but even then, not super, just a vaguely similar body plan, so B tier? Thalaris is tricky. On the surface, it's very unique. It's got big Roman and Egyptian vibes, as they were heavily involved with each other after all. But that said, it does have the exact same wing, feet, and talon armor shape as Corviknight, who itself is also a big bird that similarly wears armor, including the big helmet and the big puffy beard. It's definitely not a direct rip, but not wholly original either. A Corviknight regional variant in a Egypt Mediterranean region, you could say. C tier. Lower C tier. Felbat. We want the Darkrai audience. Black, white, and red. Cloudy hair, pointy feet, one eye covered, waistcoat and all. At least it's not literally just Darkrai, you know? Keeping it out of F tier and into D tier. Fanglope. Cobalion, anyone? Like, gosh geez, just give Cobalion the cloudy furls of the legendary beasts and you get Fanglope. D tier, like at least change the colors or something. That said, if you look at its inspirational source, which I won't get super deep into because we did that in the last video, it does look a lot more like its original source than people give it credit for. Lamball is much more detailed and is lava rather than wax, and is significantly more feminine than Litwick, to the point where I honestly can't even compare them other than Living Candle Monster and the wax is covering one of the eyes. But then again, Living Candle Monster is a bit of an overdone trope, but this is a fun twist on it, I feel. A tier. Floppy! It's a Tinkaton Sylveon fusion. They just slapped on some plants after. Wow, geez, D tier. Foxicle! Wow. An icy fox with multiple tails, sharp eyes, and with long sideburn fur. Where have I seen that before? At least it's not wispy and has those strange ears too, so. Upper D? Lower C? Foxsparks, I can't directly fault, because the Fire Fox is a Nordic thing and most of this game's monsters are Norse-inspired. So even though Pokemon already has a fiery fox, Vulpix, and a fox with an oversized black-tipped tail, Nickit, I don't think they based this fox's design on them specifically. We'll give it a B. Frostallion! I mean, it would be rude to say Pokemon owns icy unicorns now, especially after that thing. Though the flowy, smoky mane and feathering does give me shiny Rapidash vibes, but at least it's also a Pegasus. Not at all an original concept, but not a straight rip. C tier. Fuddler is a mole that digs. Simple, hard to mess up, and as far as I can tell, a vaguely unique look for it. It does have the big hands, like Drillbur, but so do every other anime mole monster. I'll give it B tier. Gale Claw is an eagle, and not one that looks like a Pokemon at least. A tier. Gobfin are cute, and I love them. Ultimately though, they are just a sort of chibi and Pokemonified version of the Salhagin from Dungeons and Dragons. Sea goblins, but a really great take on it. A tier. Gorirat. Honestly, a gorilla rat hybrid with stripes and arms like that? Nah, that's original. S tier. Grintail. I mean, it's based on the Cheshire Cat, which does have a face like this, but not literally Galarian Meowth's face. Oh gosh, and considering that, perhaps it's Purugly's body? No, not really. Skitty's ears? Also no, not really. It's just a bean-shaped Cheshire Cat with Galarian Meowth's face. D tier? C? This is hard. Grizzbolt. Totoro and Electabuzz got freaky. But that may be me looking for things. It feels pretty original. A bear with Electabuzz's fur pattern, perhaps. We'll give it a C. Gummoss is a cute one, and not at all like Pokemon slimes. In fact, a slime made of tree gum wearing a potted plant is an incredibly unique take on the classic RPG slime formula that I haven't seen before. S tier. Hangyu. I guess you could say it's if Chimecho and Klefki had a baby, but instead of collecting keys, it collects necks. It's one of those ideas that's way too edgy for Pokemon to ever do, but cutified enough to still work as a Pokemon-like thing. The kind of thing you'd see like an edgy ROM hack try to do. Let's go A tier. Hellzephyr! You know, maybe the birds in this game are just inherently generic, you know, because most of them are pretty original. By which I mean, not obviously just a Pokemon with some tweaks. And this one is no different. A tier again. Hoocrates! A wise owl. It's been done, but I can't fault this take on it. A tier. Loop Moon is a weirdie, definitely big Zoroark vibes. You just color the chest white and give it an actual tail instead of Zoroark's weird hair tail thing. From there, accessorize. D tier? It's different enough to stay out of F IMO, but also not really merging many other mon into it. IDK. Upper D, lower C. But Incineram! Oh, that's where Zoroark's tail hair thing went. So given the whole fire starter Zodiac theory, it spawned thousands of excellent fire-type ram fake mon made by fans, and any number of those could have inspired this. Plus, devilly fire ram things are nothing new, but it's not a Pokemon directly, even if it has Zoroark's body plan and definitely Zoroark's hair. So, A bonus point, I guess? Lower B tier? C? You could argue Zoroark Houndoom fusion, but you'd still have to apply ram elements, and it's all too fresh to be strictly a ripoff. Lower B tier stays. Another fire ram is Arsox, who you could say is a fire-type Go-Goat, but honestly I think that's a bit of a stretch to say. Especially when Pokemon Sage, one of the best and most well-known fan-made ROM hacks, has this guy. Overlapping ideas do occur, but considering the rest of this game, I'm gonna go ahead and go F tier. That said though, if you're gonna be mad about stealing Fakemon designs, you're gonna have to be mad at Pokemon too. But at least it's not as potentially blatant as this next one we're gonna skip to. So, there's like hundreds of millions of different animals on Earth, right? And then you add plants and rocks to the mix, and the number explodes. So many things to base an anime monster on. So say you want to do a pyromancer for your creature collecting game. You have countless options of things to apply the concept of pyromancer to. And you know what Palworld did? They did the exact same animal that Pokemon's Pyromancer is. Wixen is a Finnick Fox Pyromancer, same as the Delphox line. At least they were kind enough to not just straight up rip it like they did with Cinderace. Instead it's just this old fan art of what a Mega Delphox would look like. But then again, not exactly the most original of Fakemon ideas either. But at least Fakemon artists aren't trying to make you think it's not a Pokemon, you know? And also bonus points, or rather negative bonus points, for trying to make Wixen's name sound super similar to Braixen. Wixen, Braixen, F tier. Ah, the infamous Jet Dragon. It's like if you took Latios, who itself is already a Jet Dragon, and mixed it with Salamence a bit. Mega Salamence specifically, with the shape of the head fins and all, and just throw on some robot parts, and there you go. We'll give it a D. Jolthog. So ultimately, there's not much you can do with chibi anime white hedgehog. I mean, if you were to put this right next to Shaman, you do start noticing all kinds of subtle differences that, on their own, outside of the context of the rest of this game, you could say, yeah, they look similar, but it's definitely, like, not a ripoff or anything. But then you remember the game we're talking about. It's Palworld, so this is definitely just an electric-type Shaman. F tier. Yormantide is definitely the Gyarados or even Mega Gyarados equivalent in this game, but it itself doesn't super look like it. It's more so just a generic sea monster, a concept Game Freak does not own. But nah, if anything, you could say this is more like Digimon's Seadramon or Mega Seadramon, though given Mega Gyarados' whiskers, so we'll give it a D. Catris is pretty interesting because it's a cat sorceress, which is a pretty unique design, perhaps. Easy, on the nose, yeah, but it's definitely also literally wearing Mismagius. Again, if this were just some furry character in some furry game, nobody would think twice. Maybe someone would point out, hey, it looks kind of like Mismagius' hat, I like that, haha. But again, considering the game we're talking about, yeah, this is a furry wearing Mismagius. I want to give it an F, but it'll get a D instead, since there is that semi-original furry design underneath the Mismagius. Kelpsy! Ah! They turned Dratini into a seal! Haha! D tier. Killamari. I swear I've seen something like this before. A Digimon? A Dream Eater? Just some generic JRPG? I don't know. It's kind of like those weeby squid hats, but cool. Oh, you know what? It's Tales of Xillia's Tipo. That's who it reminds me of. Bazongas! But it's still pretty different from that, and it's not a Pokemon, so let's go ahead and stick it into upper B tier, maybe? King Pekka. Herder, it's got Empoleon's trident crown. Wah. But no, it's pretty original. S tier. Milpaca 2, it's a cute cartoon alpaca. It'll get A though from not really adding much beyond that. I have seen a lot of dishonesty about this one too, saying it's literally flaffy because it's pink and fluffy, but like, do you think Pokemon should own two adjectives next to each other? Lamball. Folks be saying it's a straight up ripoff of Wooloo, but like, it's a sheep, that's a sheep, you're a sheep, I'm a sheep. They are both anime monsters based on sheep. They are going to look similar. That said, I think the argument stops at visuals because things get pretty sus when they also both do the same thing. Both of them roll around. They roll down hills and they get dizzy after they roll, but their wool protects them, making them little tanks. And like if I were making a game with Pokemon-like creatures, I'd make sure that any ones that look vaguely similar at least don't do the exact same thing on top of that, you know? It's not like sheep are iconic for rolling down hills. That's a Wooloo thing. Wooloo did it and because it's a soccer ball, because the British invented the soccer and it's from Galar, and after it evolves, you can definitely start seeing the soccer ball aspects, and like that's why it rolls. Not because it's a sheep. Sheep don't do that. Lamball rolls because Wooloo rolls. C tier. Lifmunk is kind of like a green Pikachu, Pachirisu, Leafeon, I suppose. That's what people say, but I don't super see it. To me, I feel like if you have to pull in more than two Pokemon, and even then it's just kind of a similar vibe rather than literally, you're stretching. Be honest with yourself. Lifmunk gets A tier. Lavander, dear God. I mean, it is just if Salazzle was the lusty Argonian maid and turned all the way up to 11 or 69. Like again, tens of millions of animals to choose from. Why make the super salacious sex reference animal a salamander? Oh, because that's what Pokemon did. D tier. Even though it looks pretty dramatically different. Lunaris is unique appearing, but it's definitely got Mewtwo vibes, especially Mega Mewtwo vibes, especially with its lore and abilities kind of just being Mewtwo. Then again, the same thing can be said of Mewtwo when compared to Gygus. Again, remember, ideas overlap and crossover, and that's a good thing, when not done to the extent that this game be doing. Otherwise, visually, Lunaris is basically if you took the Fireball Drossel bots, which were very popular years ago, and then you merged them all together and made it an alien. C tier. Mamorist is thankfully unlike any Pokemon or Pokemon-like elephant as far as I can tell. At most, you could say that its flat back is like Donphan's, but like an anime monster elephant is going to look like an anime monster elephant. And there are plenty of Fakemon who have done the concept of forest elephant, but none of them look like it, despite the claims of many on the Twitter sphere. Be honest. A tier. Moraith is really cool. Vibes of familiarity again, but Pokemon hasn't really touched the Manticore directly yet, and I can't seem to pinpoint why it feels familiar to me. So A tier. Maybe S even. Mao is just an Egyptian cat with really cool origins I cover in the Palworld Origins video. It's ultimately just an accessories Egyptian cat though, done plenty of times. Keeping it out of S tier and straight into A. Menacing is overall original, though there are claims of it having Giratina's face. Kinda. Like, yeah, I see it. But I do still feel like to pick apart designs by single individual parts like that, you can just as easily claim that Pokemon themselves have stolen a lot from others too. They better watch out. Slowbro's tail is just Sea Slime's hat from the earlier Dragon Quest. So again, if this were any other game, I'd say it's perfectly fine and just a coincidence that it looks so similar, but again, yeah, since it's this game, that'll knock it down a tier. The design is 90% original, but that face is gonna keep it into B tier. Mazarina. Gotta say, I have never seen a cow depicted with a monster face like this. I suppose it's like a Snorlax face, but only kinda. Upper B tier. Necrosis and Palladius too. I do gotta wonder if these pals would exist in Palworld if Pokemon hadn't made Armarouge and Ceruledge. They do just kinda seem like them, but centaurs. And then with a lot more detail added on. So really, they look like they'd fit perfectly well next to Digimon. So let's go C tier. Nightwing is a somewhat middling bird, just because it's got the same color palette, edgy head feather motif, and star chest that Staraptor does. And maybe there's a touch of Braviary in there too, but at least it's take Staraptor and make it different, and not take Staraptor. You know, C tier. Nox is literally just a shiny Eevee in a jacket. Or at best, maybe it's like a new take on an evolution that barely changes Eevee. You should just hold F tier! Orzhirk has Zekrom and Garchomp vibes, but I see folks online saying it's literally Garchomp's model. I guess it has a vaguely Landsharky face and it stands upright, but it kinda ends there. Garchomp could have been the initial inspiration, sure, but this design changes it drastically enough that I feel it lands in B tier. Pangolett is a sort of generic take on a cute little penguinmon. Nothing special, but at least it's not Piplup. Do you think it explodes because of Disgaea's Prinny? A tier. Panking is the king of them, but it's actually more closely related to Fwax, funnily enough. And I gotta say, overall, original, like it's not just a Pokemon rip, but it's definitely a smidge uninspired. Like, ooh, it's the king of a water thing, so it's got a pirate captain's hat. Oh. B tier. Pyrin is a really cool take on the Kirin, and I can't fault it other than Fire Horse its Rapidash, but again, Pokemon doesn't own the concept of Fire Horse. I want to give it S tier, but it is ultimately just like a Kirin, but fire. So let's go A tier. Quiver just kinda looks like an over-designed Neopet. A big, fluffy white dragon. Uninspired perhaps, but not a direct rip of anything as far as I can tell. A tier. Ragnahawk's got the sus talons again. Actually, most of the big birds do, but otherwise it's okay. Let's go B tier. Rayhound is mostly original. You can argue Raichu tail, but lightning motif is pretty generic these days. But then again, Lightning Dog is so unoriginal that Pokemon has 4 of them. We'll give it C tier. Raindrix, I gotta say, pretty cool. Not any new concepts, but a newish design at least. Maybe inspired by Moosemon, though Moosemon's pretty obscure, so probably not. That's laser focusing, looking for similarities. It gets A tier. Relaxorus, thank goodness the Palworld mascot is wholly original, and a silly goofball. S tier. Reptyro is all good, methinks. It kinda has the same lore as Heatran, and also the same stance, but otherwise it's not Heatran at all. I appreciate the fire coming up from between the large scales though. A tier. But then Rabunny! Oh my word, Rabunny! It's an Emolga Sylveon fusion with an extra ribbon? Yeah. No. D tier. Robinquill is what happens when Gallade kills Decidueye and wears it as a cloak, which is fitting of this game. D tier. Ruby! Honestly, I couldn't tell you what it is, besides disgusting. It's a deer, fox, fiery, flat-faced thing. Well, I'm not tiering them based on looks or preference, but originality, so a reluctant S tier, I suppose. Rushore is kinda just a wild boar, but anime. B tier. But I also gotta point out, this made me laugh. On one of the fan-made Palworld wikis, they had absolutely no chill in Rushor's trivia section. Unlike most other pals, Rushor appears to be based on a real-life animal rather than a Pokemon. Shadowbeak is kind of legendary in its lore, right? So, kinda sus to give it a modified Arceus chain around its torso. And then consider Pokemon's Type Null and Silvally, a genetically modified attempt at creating Arceus. Shadowbeak not only has the crest, body, and feet, but the lore of Type Null to a point. An ultimate being that shouldn't exist. It should be nothing. Null. Does it even count as a pal/Pokemon? At least they leaned into the Griffin aspect a lot more. D tier? C? Maybe? Lower C. No, we'll do upper D. Sibilix. I mean, fancy fashionable Arctic moth? That's Frostmoth. But Palworld did take a completely different anthro approach to the idea, so C tier. And I do wonder if the eyes are simply a wink because it's sassy, or if it's some sort of Ronnie the Witch from Elden Ring reference. Sparkin! It's kind of like if Elekid and Pikachu was a cat. But it seems vaguely original overall thanks to it being a cat. We'll do C tier. Surfant. I can't really fault it. A good concept as an aquatic snake that's also a longboat. S tier. Suzaku's definitely got some big Digimon Dual Master Beyblade vibes, but I can't seem to fault it on any specific one monster from any of them. A tier. Upper A, lower S maybe even. Sweet! And Sweepa! Little puffballs. Hard to judge such a generic anime monster type though. Like, it feels like every JRPG and anime with monsters and things has just a puffball with limbs or tail and ears, you know? So I guess B tier. Just kind of generic. Tan Z. Yeah, Pokemon has its grass monkeys, but none of them look the part of this. B tier. Teefant. Honestly, Teapot Elephant? How many times have you seen that? Probably a lot in cartoons and books, but rarely in monster catching games, it turns out. Because the idea is too obvious of an idea. C tier. Toko Toko! It's like if you made Xatu a toucan dodo thing, so there's that at least. Upper D, lower C? Tombat. Folks will say it's Gliscor, and yeah, it is T-posing for dominance, and is a bat. But what are you gonna do? I do like how Tombat is also a yokai tomcat though, and that's honestly a take on just bat that I haven't seen before, so S tier, like, honestly. But with the note that it does also kind of look like Blaze the cat with the jewel and the hair tufts in that way. It definitely has big Sonic OC that someone tried to turn into a Kirby boss vibes. Univolt! Yeah, it's the same idea as Zebstrika, but Pokemon doesn't own Electric Horse with Lightning Bolt stripes any more than it owns Fire, Ice, or Shadow Horse. This is a very unique, though obvious take on the Lightning Horse idea IMO, but since it is a tried and true concept already, we'll do B tier. Valet or Violet kind of fits some generic elfin pixie fantasy things in its vibe, but otherwise, it's not a Pokemon. S tier. Vanworm. Again, most of the birds are all good. I can't really fault this one at all. S tier. Vixie. Yeah, it's a big-headed fox thing. Definitely has Pokemon vibes, though it doesn't seem to relate to any one directly. You could say that's an Eevee tail, but I guess I wouldn't actually be surprised if they based like 40 of them on Eevee. We'll do B tier. Warsect is sort of the most Digimon out of all of the pals. Just up the detail factor a smidge and it would look right at home next to Mega Kabuterimon and Kawagamon, right? We'll do B tier. Woollypops. I gotta feature a similar rant to Wixen. Again, there's millions upon millions of animals out there. And what do you make your cotton candy sweet monster? A fluffy dog, just like Pokemon did? At least it has different looking hair because it's just alchemy. Upper D tier. Wumpo! Kind of a generic Yeti guy, but also very similar to Wolfman, a beta Pokemon that got scrapped back in the early days. But I wouldn't hold a beta Pokemon against them though, is what I would say if this were any other game. But considering just how on the nose a lot of these not Pokemon are with Pokemon, and then there's actually been a few pals we've seen in trailers and via data mining and such that aren't in the early access game that are also super obvious, like the currently unnamed Dark Mutant, who just straight up looks like Shadow Mega Mewtwo with some extra spikes. Dragostrophe? Dragostrophe? That's a name. But did you mean Dark Reshiram? It's Reshiram, but with edgy colors. And then there's this thing. I gotta see its face, because right now all I'm thinking is Reshiram again. And then there's a giant whale! At least it's not just Whalelord. It seems unique enough of a concept for a generic flying giant whale. Boltmane, that's just Luxray. Oh, it's not even a different type. It's just a yellow Luxray with pointy ears and extra fluff between the mane. Oof. F tier. And now, just looking at the whole tier list, you can see that, yeah, not 90% of them are stolen from Pokemon straight up, but there are still some super blatant ones. But I gotta ask, is it stealing or is it parody? This whole controversy got to the point of death threats towards the developers and hundreds of tweets at various Nintendo and Game Freak devs about this game's thievery, as if they somehow don't know about the second most played Steam game in history that has also already outsold one of their own big games recently. It just reminds me of when a vaguely related thing happened to me years ago. I made a game theory parody video. I adopted and exaggerated MatPat's speech patterns and editing style at the time, and we even used the same background image that he used, which funnily enough was the first free stock image result when you type in free wrinkled paper background texture. And this video of mine also caused a small stir. Death threats my way, constant tweets at MatPat and his team about some no-name is stealing your format and even stole your background. Give him a copyright strike. And I feel a similar thing is happening here. Considering just how dark and cynical and downright silly Palworld is with its concepts, it's entirely possible that the whole game is a joke to an extent. In some regards, it's almost as silly and dark as that PETA Pokemon parody game that makes it all dark and stuff, and that game literally used Pokemon designs. Like, literally. No originality whatsoever. No, it's Cinderace but it's green. No, that's straight up Pikachu and friends. And that game was 100% legal, thanks to parody. The game may have had real Pokemon in it, but it didn't play like Pokemon at all, and was even a commentary about it. Arguably, Palworld is doing the same thing, but a lot of people don't understand that, and there may even be people who legitimately believe that all creature collector games are just Pokemon ripoffs. Like, inspired, yeah, absolutely. Nexomon, Cassette Beasts, Temtem, they're all very clear about them being inspired by Pokemon, but they also are definitely not ripoffs. Should one company, Game Freak, that didn't even invent the genre, have a monopoly on the whole genre because they popularized it? A genre that Palworld almost isn't? Pokemon with guns is the meme, yes, but having now finished the game, the creature catching feels almost like a tacked on element rather than the core gameplay. Also, you don't even get guns until like the last third of the game. Kind of a mean little marketing trick they did there. This is a Four Horsemen game, an early access survival open world crafting game, with Pokemon-like creatures to catch and fight alongside you. This game is significantly closer to Arc than it is to Pokemon. Look more into Arc for the details there, but heck, Arc had a really popular Pokemon mod that added Pokemon and Pokeballs that you could even catch the in-game dinosaurs with. And Palworld really is just that mod at its core. So yeah, Palworld also ripped off its gameplay and tweaked it. Palworld is creatively poor, absolutely. I mean, look at the tier list. Arguably, there's a correlation between their most original designs also being the most uninspired and simple. There's so many amazing Fakemon artists out there, guys. Please, just hire some. But the fact that it's doing as well as it is, despite all of the creative bankruptcy and all of this drama surrounding it, to me, that says a lot about the failings of Game Freak and Nintendo. I mean, for every cringy Nintendo White Knighter out there, there's a die-hard Pokemon hater creaming themselves over a small indie team making a Pokemon game that has graphics. Even though those graphics are mostly just generic Unity and Unreal Engine assets that clash with the style of the PALs. But I will admit, while lacking in stylization, it does dramatically look better than anything Pokemon has put out in ever. Like, there's draw distance, there's frames. Those are very basic things. It's not perfect, of course, but it's better enough for most people. And even if you got rid of the guns and the over-the-top elements of Palworld, I feel like it would still be doing amazing in the sales numbers, because this, or something similar to this, is what a lot of people have wanted Pokemon to do for years to even decades. This is arguably how you would do an open-world Pokemon game. Remember how excited people were when Legends Arceus was first revealed, and the trainer had to, like, dodge an attack from a Pokemon? And then remember how disappointed a lot of people were when they found out that once you throw your own Pokemon out, it's just regular old 1v1 turn-based battles again? Like, no, Game Freak, you were so close! I'm seeing loads of threads from those who despise Palworld for what it is, saying to just play any of these other Pokemon-like games instead. There's countless of fantastic Pokemon-like games out there that aren't Pokemon. But they do all have the same issue. They are just like Pokemon's gameplay instead of evolving it in any meaningful way. They are all linear, turn-based, too much tell don't show story, slow, turn-based. A lot of folks don't want that, and may even love Pokemon the concept, but not Pokemon the gameplay, which is evidenced by most of those other games not doing nearly as well as Palworld. Palworld finally filled a genre void, a void that's existed for decades, and since they filled it, and filled it decently well enough, I mean, look at the Steam reviews. Gamers can, unfortunately, look past and forgive the moral shortcomings of their creative design department, though I do wonder if they feel guilty at all, or if Verdash and the other F-tiers were intentionally done with the intent of parody. Now, I don't want to pile any more drama on the poor artist's head, so no specific mentions, but there was a Fakemon artist who posted their Fakemon design somewhat jokingly saying, "Oh, come on, really?" while comparing their Fakemon to a Pal. Those mad at Palworld for existing in the state that it is, so rabid in their hate, then took it as evidence of even more direct theft, even though it was later pointed out that the Pal in question was featured in a Palworld trailer before the artist had ever originally posted their own Fakemon design, making the similarities completely coincidental. Which is something I think a lot of Pokemon diehard fans need to understand generally, not just in the context of Palworld. You can look at Nexomon, or Temtems, Digimon, or Cassette Beasts and say, "Oh, that looks just like this Fakemon! They are stealing from fan artists!" Meanwhile, the monster designer based it on the same cryptid, or the same animal, or the same idea that the Fakemon artists did. And it's all just coincidence. And like I said forever ago, this is something that Pokemon themselves have been accused of too. Picking out this one specifically, it even has the same sort of idea that Palafin has, with the whole form-swapping muscle thing. It could be plagiarism, but it's more likely coincidence, because good ideas overlap. Great minds think alike. And dumb ones rarely differ. That said, though, no, plenty of the Pals are just simple rips. I mean, on the flip side, though, I've seen others claim things like Relaxorus is a Quagsire ripoff, and even that Killamari is a ripoff of Esper. Like, what? That's not a typo, because there is an Esper knockoff. What's the same with Killamari? The eyes? There's a good chance you've got the same eyes as Genghis Khan. That don't make him your dad. Look, if you're going to laser focus on finding similarities in designs, you are going to find them. All I'm saying is take a step back and be realistic. Just because there are undoubtedly a lot of ripoffs doesn't mean they all are in some way. I mean, try this. Frigibax is literally a Godzilla ripoff, and Pokemon should be sued. Diehard Pokemon fans say, what? No! It's an homage. They changed the design plenty. Oh, but using similar looking eyes is too much even though they supposedly changed a cat into a flying squid hat? There absolutely is plagiarism to a point in Palworld. And that's not, I'm not saying that there isn't, but it is not nearly as rampant as many Twitterers would have you believe. Hence this tier list. And if it were as rampant as they claim, they'd have been sued out of existence before the game even launched. Heck, a non-released mod that adds Pokemon to Palworld got legally taken down within hours of its announcement, proving Game Freak and Nintendo are well aware of Palworld and are historically notorious for taking legal action against even some of the slightest of things. And it's also important to note that they and Pocket Pair, Palworld's developers, are Japanese, and Japan has significantly stricter copyright laws than the US. They don't even have fair use laws over there. If real, actual model mesh or texture theft were happening, this would absolutely be the clearest cut case and an easy win for Nintendo to take all of the money Pocket Pair has made from Palworld so far. Over $100 million at this point at least. But they aren't suing them because it's not so clear-cut, likely because models weren't stolen, and nobody owns the idea of a small blue penguin that shoots water. Plus, we also know Pocket Pair already put their entire game through Japan's copyright check system, and it passed. Even with Verdash in it. Like, egad, what? You know what, Pocket Pair? I will only forgive Verdash if it's like an early access placeholder design, because it is honestly disgusting. Like, it may be legal, but it is still shame. Shame! But if this is okay in one of the world's strictest copyright systems, gestures vaguely. I do understand that Twitter tends to get very it's just like Pokemon, it has deer and furries, and they raise the alarms. The air raid siren of shame blares loudly, alerting the masses who might not have known about Palworld's existence to its existence. Hey, what's the alarm going off for? Oh, well, there's this new game called Palworld. It mixes Ark and Pokemon, and it stole some ideas and stuff. Oh, heck, that sounds super fun. I'm gonna go tell all my friends. No, this is just like Hogwarts Legacy again! No! There is no such thing as bad publicity. If you want something to fail, just follow these rules simply. Step 1, shut up. But if it's something like morally bad, it is fine to point that out and cast shame. But you have to be honest about it. There is so much exaggeration with the figures and the childish thinking about legality and what Pokemon actually owns and has the rights to. Huge stretches and leaps of logic with what counts as a ripoff, and all of it just makes passersby who see one bit of it think, the internet is overreacting again. Is it Tuesday? I don't want to get emotionally involved in that mess, so I'll just play this new game I heard about Palworld instead. Boy, am I glad there was so much shouting about it, or I wouldn't have found out it exists. And it's not like the other side is being entirely honest either, with memes like these. Hey, my game is similar to yours. Yeah, let's call them Souls-likes. And the fans are happy to have more games they love. Hey, my game is similar to yours. Yeah, let's call them auto shooters. And the fans are happy to have more games they love. Hey, my game... Like, I get it, on the surface it might seem like there's that, but it's a little disingenuous to say that's what the whole anti-Palworld move's all about. It's not because it's a game with creatures in it that are in a similar art style to Pokemon. It's not because it's a game where you catch creatures in little spheres. It's because of Verdash and Nox and the just blatant non-creativeness. They just made not Pokemon based on Pokemon instead of basing them on other things like every other Pokemon clone tends to do. You know? There's no creativity, there's no soul outside of the actual, gameplay side of it. It's just dishonest to say this is the entire movement. Many PAL models are nearly identical to Pokemon models. Yup. AAA 3D artists have even said they can't get as identical results when making game sequels after importing NPC models. Yep. Modeling professionals say multiple models with such identical proportions and skeletons is impossible without tracing at best and copy-pasting at worst. That makes sense to me. So it is reasonably possible Palworld stole from Pokemon. Pokemon doesn't own snakes. Cope. Sees more.
I've been accused of using the Pokemon character Farfetch'd. If you notice, if you look at these two models very closely, you can tell that mine's very big and the Farfetch is very small. What I'm about to do is actually akin to fabricating evidence. Okay. Whew. Yeah, I mean, like, some parts kind of line up. When, you know, every 3D artist knows that when you sculpt a bird, they all have the same proportions. They're always going to look the same. You know, I just don't see it. You know, it's a different character. It's totally original. And, you know, I mean, look at the topology. Look, the topology is different. The size is different. It's a carrot.
The Pokemon controversy? I don't give a shit, dude. I could not care less. Hopefully Pokemon will get off their ass and make a game like this.
I say this penultimate paragraph with immense heartbreak because I love Pokemon. I mean, look at my YouTube channel and the room. Palworld's success says a lot, especially considering that Pocket Pair is, or was, an extremely low-budgeted, amateur, indie, and self-admitted unskilled game development team. They had to learn about how Unreal Engine worked while making this game, along with basic things like how modeling and rigging worked while making this game. That's basic stuff. They learned as they went. And the fact that they went from that to making the second most played game on Steam in history, and even outselling a recent Pokemon game in its respective first week, says a lot about the lack of competition and, more importantly, the innovation in the creature collector genre. A genre that people love, but for one reason or another, rarely stray away from Pokemon. Even though the last few Pokemon games have been lacking dramatically more and more from the mainstream perspective. And since Pokemon innovations have been baby steps at best, pray those steps are forward, it gives this impression that Game Freak isn't interested in evolving their games. Or as many would put it, Game Freak is disinterested in making anything good again, since whatever they do will sell. And so, a different company did what Game Freak should have done. And despite the low budgets and morally dubious design borrowing, they did it. They made a creature collector game that isn't perfect, but is leaps and bounds closer to what many people have wished Pokemon would do for eons. To summarize a recent interview with the Palworld dev team, they admitted both to lacking creative vision and that they do not want to be trendsetters, they are simply trend followers. And they were also asked if they think they would ever think of working at Nintendo, but they admitted they would not be a good fit at Nintendo because Nintendo wants to make creative and groundbreaking games, while they at Pocket Pair just want to make games that people like. Damning. But looking at just how emotionally charged a lot of the Palworld hate is getting, and how much effort people are putting into laser focusing and breaking all of their designs down and making videos and social posts trying to stop its incredibly fast rising popularity, it all honestly just makes me start thinking, well, dang. If Game Freak simply put in the same level of effort into making a new style of Pokemon game that they are, the people trying to take Palworld apart, then Palworld would have never happened. There wouldn't be such a lack of innovation in the creature collector genre. Pokemon could have easily made a Palworld that's significantly better. I mean, honestly, just swap out the guns and swords for like a Pikachu or other Pokemon on your shoulder at all times doing the zapping and slashing at your command. Exact same gameplay. Swap out the butchery and slave labor for just proper farming from any of the many foodmon and properly encouraged factory setting stuff up. Like, yeah, friendship instead of slaves. That's all you have to do. But they didn't. And they may never. Because why innovate when you could just not? And still roll in the dough as the biggest media franchise in the world. Hopefully, Palworld proves to them that people want this kind of game, and maybe that'll kick Game Freak into gear, which in turn means Palworld's existence is good for Pokemon fans too, despite its creative shortcomings. But will this inspire Pokemon to finally do something different? Only time will tell. And the same goes for if they get sued or not. A part of me doubts they will, but honestly, if they do and they lose and they owe the Big N lots of money, I won't be surprised at all. Because, like, Verdash! Nox! Azurope! Egad! I'll post a link to the Originality tier list in the description. And while you're down there, if you care to learn about the deep origins of all of the pals, or the significantly deeper origins of various Pokemon, that's what my channel is all about. And thank you for watching this all the way through. If you think I missed something, because maybe there's a Digimon I don't know about, that is like exactly one of the pals, you know, let me know in the comments. But please be honest about it. And be honest to others, as that will also help you be honest to yourself. Never stop using your noggin.